The personal identity crisis of the millennials. What exactly is going on? Is it really that bad? Or maybe not? Is the millennials realizing something that things has to be changed? So let's talk about that. So the millennials born between 1980s until late 90s until 2000. And I think this generation is going through a massive change. And if you watch a couple of videos about the millennials and things like that, you know, they are being labeled as entitled or even a little bit like narcissistic. Like they are obsessed with status, success, fame, recognition, wealth. Many millennials want to become a celebrity on Instagram, on YouTube, become a personal brand, receive all this recognition. And millennials, they are very impatient. They don't want to work or suffer right now and then later have that thing that we think we must all have, because then we become happy. And of course you have heard it before. So what is actually really going on? Is this only related to the millennials? Or perhaps also the generation after that, Generation Z, is also realizing something? Like what we have been taught from our previous generation is outdated. So when we look at this generation, I think the millennials, the stats are there, they were raised in families, in pretty dysfunctional families, where divorce rates were going absolutely skyrocket in the 80s and 90s. Also the parenting strategies were perhaps also a little bit outdated. It didn't really serve us that much. The second thing, of course, is that we were raised by a generation that was just born after the Second World War. So our grandparents, my grandmother, survived the Second World War. She also survived the major flood which happened in the southwest of the Netherlands. My grandfather was a fisherman, because my region, there are a lot of farms on growing mussels. They import the seeds and then they grow the mussels and sell it, export it all over the world. So he was a fisherman on the mussels, but then a virus occurred and he got scared and he pulled out of the business. And he started to work as on a government ship doing surveys and things like that, working as an employee. And he had major regrets doing so. He became more bitter. He started to drink more, smoke more, and he became abusive. So my father experienced a pretty abusive childhood himself. And then you get all these emotional patterns, you take over. And then, you know, you are 17, 18 years old and the only thing you actually really want is to escape your household, get married, work hard, get a house and all these basic things. But you haven't really resolved that what you carry with you. And then people from that time, they started to have children very young, most of them before they even turned into the 30s. There's a great book in the world written by Donald Neil Walsh. I think it was another story or another book. I think it was that book. It actually also described like children should not be raised by people below the 50s. Now, of course, biologically, people don't really get children after the 50s. But being raised by an elderly is actually not so bad idea. But of course, that didn't happen. So we got introduced to some parenting strategies that maybe didn't really serve us that well. We were missing out on lots of emotional needs. That's the first thing. Emotional needs were never met. Second thing in these parenting strategies is that we were projected lots of expectations on how we should be and what we should be doing and what we should be having. Again, we were raised by a generation that really cared about material needs, because that's how they got raised by a generation who went through the Second World War, where there was lots of scarcity. So the real emphasis was, of course, on going after your basic needs. So there were always these high expectations on what we should be achieving in life. And you know, we were trying to, of course, meet that expectation. And this refers back to this whole thing about authenticity, one of my last videos I spoke about. Because we were shutting down a part of our authenticity in order to meet that expectation. You know, we went through the school system, we went onto a career ladder, we went to a university and so on. We were collecting massive amount of debts in order to meet that expectation that were projected on us from our previous generation. Then we found ourselves in a fancy corporate job with a fancy title. And then we slowly start to realize, wait a minute, this pipe dream I was being sold at does not longer exist. There's nothing really, anything else at the end of this rainbow. It's an illusion. So why should I suffer so much and sacrifice so much for something that ain't there? And then they call us entitled, impatient. Because we don't want to sacrifice all these days in order to change some kind of material thing that never seems to last, first of all, in satisfaction anyway, or it can be taken away by external circumstances or events, forces. So this whole millennial generation, first of all, it was by being raised by a generation with lots of emotional issues themselves. They projected large amount of material expectations on us. We were trying to follow that in order to please them. We were shutting down a part of our own authenticity. We were trying to do what they told us what it is that we should be doing. We all moved massively to a city, and cities have become super overcrowded, overpopulated. We have to move further out of the city centers. We spend hours in daily commutes. We pay way too much in rent, and still when we have our 30s, we still cannot afford to pay a whole apartment for ourselves. We can still not afford to buy our own house because of all the study debts we have collected along the way, which we're still trying to pay off. Or we are still in our 30s and we still have to do a room share. So no freaking wonder we are also called the burnout generation. So then there is this group who found themselves in their fancy corporate job with a fancy title, who have ticked all the boxes, and who's there and who's waking up and she becomes furious about this generation. He or she feels that I have to give so much. I have to give so much to this corporation, this company I work for. Yet I feel like they expect so much from me, but I'm not really getting anywhere. Which is, of course, a very strong ingredient, a recipe for, of course, burnout, depression, anxiety, stress, you name it. And people start to feel like they are being exploited by the employer, the corporation they work for. They feel like they start to see themselves, they are like a bunch of slave traders. I'm like in this modern enslavement system, going absolutely nowhere, spinning my wheels, running on a hamster wheel, and where I'm trying to go, there's nothing to find there. Then you can say, you know what, I'm going to jump off this hamster wheel. I'm tired, I'm freaking tired of this. Then there is this part who says, you know what, I'm going to work freaking 80 hours a week in order to build my own business on the internet, become a personal brand, to avoid this 40-hour work week. We all want to work from home. And when you are indeed in a corporate job and you have this daily commute every day of 1 hour, an hour and a half, You spend totally 2 to 3 hours in commuting to your job, and at your job you also spend 8-9 hours. You come home, you bring your laptop from the company, you still open up to check if you received any late emails, because that's really what expecting from you, to do all this extra thing, because then you could perhaps go to the next promotion or receive that recognition. And you're still on your laptop, on your bed, partner next to you. You don't really connect to each other. You're still going through your emails. And the next day you start all over again. So going from that to working from home actually sounds like a dream for many. And 10 years ago I did indeed exactly like that. I jumped off this hamster wheel. I got furious. I wanted to build my own internet business, everything. I wanted to work from home. Now I started to hate it, work from home. The feeling of isolation and the lack of social interaction. It can eat your soul from the inside out. It's another recipe for feeling apathetic, depressed, not feeling like wanting to do anything. What's the freaking point doing anything at all? All you get is this artificial recognition on the internet, likes, comments, subscribers, and you think, what's the point of doing this? So working from home can also be dangerous. And then we have, instead of people who have already experienced, like, okay, so I jump from one hamster wheel, I jump on to another hamster wheel, and then I cannot still not really get where I thought I wanted to go, and then people feel like giving up. They end up in indeed another burnout, depression, or you name it. Or perhaps they go back where they actually got started before they found a fancy title job in a corporation, and which was like a low entry job working for £10 an hour. Exactly what they got during the study times. So this is kind of like a pattern where many millennials are at, and many millennials realize what have been sold ain't working. So what exactly is it that we want? It seems like we cannot find anything that is outside there in this external world, this materialistic world that's based on consumerism. We have been sold that is out there. You need to chase that thing, and many of us, we realize there's nothing to chase because I cannot go anywhere. There's nothing to find that can truly satisfy me. So the shift that is happening, and that's why we like to call it the personal identity crisis, because many have this conflict going on, like, wait a minute, I want to experience this thing, but I'm still with one leg in this old thing that ain't working, and it also seems to be at the edge of a collapse. But yet I still try to go along with it. And because we want to be very present with it, we don't want the thing next year or whatever, we want things now, we are then being called entitled, impatient, and you name it. Or being called narcissistic because of, the void we have experienced in our own childhood, that we have been raised by people who took away our authenticity and projected large amount of expectations on us, because we have to chase down this material thing, because there might be scarcity to be experienced, which is also still something we have to deal with. And we don't want to be that narcissistic person anymore. We don't want that thing that is out there. We want to experience it right now in this very moment. We don't want to work for money. We don't want to work for recognition, for approval, rewards, fame, success, wealth. It may sound nice as an extra fruit or topping on the cake, but we want to experience or taste the full cake. We want to feel grounded and have this internal foundation of working for something that feels bigger than our basic needs. The basic needs, yes, it's like the ladder of self-actualization. Maslow spoke about it, that once your basic needs are being met, it is a must. It is an absolutely must for our psyche to work on self-actualization. Because if we don't, we start to eat our soul from the inside out. It is a must for human evolution. So for many of us, these basic needs are being met, are being settled. And what we actually want, of course, is to serve a cause, a mission or purpose that feels bigger than ourselves. We don't want to work for these external rewards. We want to work on something that makes us feel connected to, let's say, a bigger collective. We want to work on something that ain't for ourselves. I think that is really what we're craving for at a deeper level. Another thing is that what we are doing in this very moment, we want to do it from a state of creative flow. We want to be in the zone. We want to experience satisfaction from just doing that thing in this very moment. A sense of joy, inspiration, purpose, passion, love, excitement. That's what we want in this very moment. That's what I mean with baking this cake, this internal foundation. And if there comes some topping on top of it, some fruit on top of it, nice. But we cannot chase it down any longer. Because if we do so, we end up keep feeling miserable and ending up nowhere, and we keep feeding this beast of capitalism that only seems to exploit the human soul. If we don't start to work from the inside out. And I think that's really the main key lesson for us millennials. I think it applies more to millennials because millennials who have already given birth to children, they already realize, wait a minute, I want to give a better parenting strategy than what I've received, and I want to do everything differently. So Generation Z is already realizing like authenticity is the #1 thing on my list to develop, and that's probably also what you're teaching your children as well. If you don't have any wish for children like myself, that is because you probably want to commit yourself more to this whole self-actualization thing. So let me know your thoughts. Could you relate to any of these topics? Please let me know, simply drop a comment below, and hopefully I will see you in one of my next videos. Take care for now. Bye bye.